Hi, and welcome to Untethered with Jen Liss, the podcast that's here to help you free yourself from the crap that's holding you back so you can claim the life you're meant to live. I'm your host, Jen, and in this episode, we're going to talk about closing the confidence gap. Let's dive in. Hi, friends. Today's podcast episode is such a delight. We have Kelli Thompson here with us. She is a women's leadership coach and a speaker who helps women advance to the rooms where decisions are made. How freaking amazing is that? She has coached and trained hundreds of women to trust themselves and lead with more confidence, create a career they love. And she is the founder of Clarity and Confidence Women's Leadership Program, a Stevie Award winner for Women's in Business Coach of the Year. She is just such an amazing human being who is really out to serve the world by sharing the things that she has learned on her own journey. And she just, oh my gosh, we use the word nuggets in this episode. She is dropping bomb nuggets on us today of wisdom that anybody can use, whether you're an entrepreneur, whether you're in the corporate world, whether you are looking to leave the corporate world or vice versa. I've done both in my lifetime and could have definitely used some of the things that she shares today. We talk about doubt. We obviously talk about confidence. We talk about moving forward before you're confident enough. We talk about all of the tethers, the cultural tethers that can hold us stuck in a life that we are not really enjoying. And she's also from the Midwest, grew up in Nebraska. I grew up in Kansas, and we have a lot of similarities in our stories. So, and I know that you're going to see some similarities for yourself too. So everyone, welcome the amazing Kelli Thompson. Hi, Kelli.
Oh, hi, Jen. Thank you for having me.
I am so glad that you were here. And I was just telling you a moment ago before we hit record, like your specific voice, like from the direction that you come from. Well, your specific voice has never been on this podcast, but the direction you come at it, I feel like is needed. And what you're sharing with the world is so needed in general that I'm so excited to have you here.
Oh, well, thank you. It sounds like we both lived a corporate life that we could talk about. So
yes. Yes. And are you still, I think that's a question. Do you yourself work in corporate, or you have your own business that you bring to corporate?
Yeah, I have my own business that I bring to corporate. I've been out on my own since 2019. And so I've been running my own business since then. I survived during the pandemic. I had lots of learnings, but now like I work with a lot of corporate women. That is primarily my client for one-on-one, but I have a lot of corporate clients. And so now I get to go into corporations and do training and speaking and those sort of things. And lots of times work with their leaders. And then I get to come back to my own business these days. So I get to like dip my toe in, but then come right back.
I love it. And you have a new book called Closing the Confidence Gap that we're going to definitely dive into for sure. But I would love to hear like what brought you to the mission that you're currently on. You're really, you love supporting women, helping them to advance, make an impact in the rooms where decisions are made. Like this is something that it's like, we know women need to be doing this. Like we need women in the room. We need different perspectives, but yet it's still such a struggle. Like, why is this something you're so passionate about?
Yeah, I think it goes back to like, let's just go back to when I was in my first role out of college. The majority of my time was spent working for financial services, banking organizations, and then in technology companies. And, if you aren't aware, banking, finance, it's a very male-dominated industry. But if you go back to 2008, when I got my first leadership role, I remember lots of times being one of the only women in the decision-making rooms at the table. And I also remember the company that I worked for was actually voted like a best place to work for working mothers because we had a daycare and we had lactation rooms. But the interesting thing at the time I was thinking was like, gosh, when I look up at the top, there's like no women leaders, like the C-suite and then like the level below them was all men. I'm like, well, that's interesting that we can be a best place to work for working moms. But yet I always just felt like my growth would be capped there, because there was just no women in those ranks. But I think we have to go back to that time in 2008, 2009, and, even a little bit beyond then. like we weren't really talking about women in the workplace. I mean, we were, and we started to, but this was like pre Me Too movement. This was pre a lot of gender equity. And so it was kind of one of those things where like, this is just the way it was. And it wasn't until I actually left corporate and went off on my own. And I remember being a part of like a mastermind training group. Like here I am, a new entrepreneur. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't want to fail. So I better go get some training so I can learn how to, be an entrepreneur. And I joined like this all women's like mastermind training group. And I remember we were talking about things like imposter syndrome and doubt and speaking up and work-life balance and the invisible load that women take on both at home and work. And we were talking just about the challenges of being a parent. And there's, women in the room and their kids are in the background. Some are breastfeeding. I mean, like, this is just like all happenstance. And I remember thinking to myself and reflecting back on my own corporate career as a leader, and I was in charge of a lot of HR and leadership development. I was like, this is what I needed in corporate. Like I needed this. I mean, I loved coaching and counseling women on how to ask for things and, how to be more confident, especially in a male dominated environment. But I'm like, had I had a container of all women to just talk about some of these things and give a name to some of these things that I was feeling, but we just didn't have a name back then, like I would have been so much better. And I really became passionate then. That was a huge call for me in my own business to say, like, because I know what it's like to work and lead in male dominated environments, and because I know what it's like to feel empowered and surrounded by women and make things feel normalized and have such an amazing support group, like that's how my mission kind of came to be. And that's really how my business started to grow and codify, was helping women advance to the rooms where decisions are made, because I know how important it is for women to see themselves in leadership, because they change policy. I know how important it is to have women who can support one another and talk about the real challenges, both systemic and personal, that women face in the workplace. And that's kind of how it all evolved and came together.
Thank you so much for sharing that journey. It really it helps to hear from somebody like how they got to where they are, which is, I would love to take it back even just a little further. And I know it's what you teach now, but you obviously were able to do this yourself before even the mastermind point. So what were some of those things that you now know you were doing that got you to a leadership role at the time?
Yeah, it's interesting. Maybe I don't give myself enough credit, but I felt like I could have done so much more. I was definitely got into the middle management ranks. At the technology company, I guess I did report to the CEO, so you could consider me senior leadership.
That's senior leadership, Kelli.
Yeah. And so one of the things that I really think about, especially when I left the bank and then went to go work for the technology company where I was in senior leadership, one of the things that I really had learned through a lot of mistakes was how important it was to speak up. I was not good at speaking up when I was at the bank. Like I can vividly remember sitting in like one of those all gray conference rooms when we were all in the office, and you'd sit in those all day meetings, and you would be in the afternoon and you're just like, oh my gosh, like the conversation is circling. And I remember like feeling so annoyed. And so we got a bathroom break. I go to the bathroom and I'm like, why am I so annoyed? And I'm like, oh, it's because we're hearing from the same people. And all these people happen to be men. And I'm like, well, are there more men than women in this room today? No. Now, all the leaders were men, but the room itself was split about 50-50. And I was like, well, these women should speak up. And it's almost as if like the bathroom walls came in and they're like, well, you could be the one to speak up. And I'm like, I can't speak up. I'm like, but first I need more qualifications. I need to make sure that what I'm going to say is going to land and nobody's going to laugh at me. But first I need to make sure I work here a little longer. I mean, there's just so much self-doubt that I wish I could tell you I walked back into that room and I had so many mic drop moments, but I didn't. I walked back into the room and said nothing. But like, that was kind of the first kind of aha for me, that I was like, I'm probably being a little quieter than I should be. I'm probably holding back a little more than I should be. Because, I'm putting all these other people on a pedestal thinking that they know better than me. And, as I kind of continued and finished my last couple of years there, just that experience really taught me how important it is that when you have an idea, you should speak up, even though you feel a little nervous, or you should ask questions, right? And in what way is your expertise, your skills, your talents being heard? I think the other thing that really helped, especially when I moved to the tech company, was I was really, truly working in an organization that aligned with my values. We lived and worked and made decisions the same way. And honestly, I felt like I was using my best talents at work. And so those two things combined, like the energy of doing what you've been put on this earth to do, plus working alongside people who worked and lived and valued what you valued, it just felt so safe to contribute and to speak up. And so not only I think had I developed some skills, but I also think I made a really smart choice about the company I decided to join because I just felt like I belonged with them. And, when you feel that way, it just makes it a little bit easier.
That is such an important thing that I think companies are beginning to really realize that that's important.
Yeah.
And it can feel like there's so much on our shoulders to be the one to go in and speak up and be the one to do that. Do you feel like that is the case? Like it has to be, us, or do you feel like there needs to be changes in the corporations? Like where do you kind of land on that continuum? Just out of curiosity.
No, that's such a good question because that's exactly why I wrote my book. So my book is kind of written like both and. So I say the argument of my book is, there's a confidence gap. So let me just kind of start there. The confidence gap is actually a study that came out of Wharton. And they wanted to kind of understand, why does there seem to be like this gender-based difference in confidence? And so what they did was they gave a group of, obviously there's men and women in the group, a test. And they're supposed to take this test. And they did not tell them how well they did on the test. But they were supposed to go advocate to future employers on how they thought they did on the test. Because then this would, help them determine, are they going to be hired and what's their pay going to be? Well, as you can probably imagine, men did a little better job advocating for themselves, I did so great, and they were hired. And women kind of struggled with that self-advocacy piece. But guess who did better on the test? If you guessed women did a little bit better on the test, you would be correct. And what the researchers said was, well, maybe if we just start telling women that they did a little better, then their confidence would follow suit. And so my argument in the book is actually that's not going to cut it, because to see more women showing up, having more confidence at work, using healthy self-advocacy, like we need more women in the rooms where decisions are made. Like men have always had a container by nature that they've been in the rooms with other men. Like they've watched men. My father-in-law used to joke that he learned all of his leadership advice by going to the bar with his boss after work. They've always just had this mentoring container of coaching and watching and all those sorts of things. And so I argue that, to see more women showing up, using healthy self-advocacy, exuding more confidence, not being riddled with perfectionism, having more psychological safety, we need more women in the rooms. And so we need to address the systemic issues that are happening in organizations today, like the confidence gap, the gender pay gap, the invisible workload that often gets put on women in the office where they're doing more tasks that don't contribute to their salary or benefits. But we also need to examine just some of our own interpersonal, I don't want to say the word challenges, but just some of the interpersonal stuff that we deal with, right? That keeps us from being the most confident person we can be. And so that's really kind of, I tackle that both and. Yes, the systems at work need to change. But unfortunately, those aren't going to change overnight, although it would be amazing. So what are some tools that you can use to thrive inside the system while we advocate for the changes?
Yeah. Thank you for speaking to both sides like that. It feels very practical and very real and because like I said, it can just feel like, there's so much for me to do. But at the same time, when you start speaking up, when you gain confidence, it is going to shift things. And you could be one of those people in the room that starts to begin to shift it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
What is one of the biggest challenges that you see people facing when trying to boost their confidence or trying to grow their career?
Yeah. So let's just, I think that's two different answers. So let's start with the first one. The biggest challenge that I see when people are trying to boost their confidence is honestly the belief that they have to feel confident to go do the thing. And that's actually the number one thing that will hold people back, because in reality, like if you wait until you feel confident, like you will be waiting a very long time and you will probably be buried before you do the thing. Because the secret is that the actions of confidence come first and the feelings come second. Like if you talk to, I was having actually a conversation, those of you in the business world may know her, with Indra Nooyi. She's the CEO of Pepsi, and another technology leader named Padmasree Warrior, like very well respected in the tech industry. She's on the board of Microsoft and Spotify. And they were both saying, they're like, if you are too comfortable at work, then you probably aren't in a challenging enough position. They're like, the key to being a leader at work is to do things while you're very uncomfortable. because that's where the magic happens. And so, what I often work through with my clients when they come to me one-on-one, they might be saying, well, I just don't feel confident enough to make a job change. I don't feel confident enough to do this public speaking thing that I want to do. I don't feel confident enough to speak up and ask, or to, make like an industry career change. And so what we're often working through is, how do we take action while also feeling nervous? How do we take action while also allowing for just that discomfort that's going to be there? How do we present ourselves well while also feeling incredible doubt? Because the thing that I tell all my clients, and what I want you to know, is I've been a corporate trainer and a public speaker for almost 20 years now, 15, 20 years, and I still get nervous. I still get nervous because I'm normal and I'm human, and doubt is just a healthy emotion. And I often ask them to reflect. I say, have you ever listened to a speaker who is absolutely sure of themselves? And I'm like, how does that person make you feel sometimes? And they're like, oh, a little turned off. I'm like, yeah, they could benefit from a little doubt. And so it's just kind of a nice reminder that, like, that doubt, those nerves, like the anxiousness, it's because we care, and it keeps us humble and it keeps us curious. And so to answer your first question, it's not about how do we feel more confident. It's like, how do we take the right next action in alignment with our values while also allowing space for that discomfort that will be there for the rest of your life. And I hope that that's not like a wah, wah, but I hope it's actually freeing, just to know that nobody ever feels like totally equipped all the time, especially when they're stretching their comfort zone.
Yeah, that's so great. And even if I reflect on my own life, that is what I have done, is just taken action before being confident. Before being confident, it was the right decision. Before being confident that I can even do the thing, it's like, just dive in. So I love that approach. And I really am interested to consider more and more what you just said about doubt, because so much we want to eviscerate doubt. We're like, doubt is bad. Doubt is this horrible emotion that we feel, and you can't feel it or else you'll never accomplish your dreams. But what you're saying is like, it's good. It keeps you curious. It keeps you, humble, both humble and curious. Both of those things are such amazing. Like, to be curious is to be loving, is to be creative, is to open ourselves up to new opportunities. And that little bit of doubt keeps that for us. Otherwise, you're absolutely just like a megalomaniac, right?
Oh, absolutely. Like, I have a joke, and because my husband and I love to watch a lot of true crime. And so the joke that I often give my audiences is like, there are people in this world that don't feel doubt, and you will find them on Dateline on Friday nights. Like, if doubt is a normal, healthy human emotion. And yeah, sociopaths don't feel a lot of doubt in places they should. But also, there is a phenomenon called the Dunning-Kruger effect. And it's when people believe that they are more competent than they actually are. I mean, a good, example of this is, Kanye West ran for president. Like, no doubt that maybe he should have maybe a couple of qualifications in that regard. A lot of people, and I don't want to speculate, but a lot of people offer up when Elon Musk bought Twitter. He just doesn't have a lot of doubt, right? Like, is he truly qualified to do that? I don't know. We can ask that question. But, just remember that the absence of doubt cannot be good either. But you are so right. And that's one of the things I actually say in the book, is so many organizations spend so much time trying to squash doubt. It's not a fashionable feeling. Nobody likes it. It doesn't feel good. But you are exactly right in saying, like, it keeps us humble and curious and connected. Because when I doubt, like, what I'm really asking myself is, are people going to like this? Is this going to resonate? Am I saying the right thing at the right time? I'm like, those are genuine questions that help us be better connectors and communicators.
So, okay, if the doubt is okay, but yet we want to take action before we're confident, before we're actually feeling confident, how do we take those actions? Do you have any tips, any tricks?
Yeah.
Anything out of your bag?
Well, let's just use an example. Okay. So I wanted to write a book from the time that I was a little girl. Like, I loved to read. I used to read the dictionary for fun, to learn new words. Like, I wasn't an athlete, but I was a reader. And so I never knew what I was going to write about. Well, always still kept this in the back of my mind. I want to write a book. I want to write a book. At the end of 2020, I was sick of my own excuses. And I didn't have a lot of confidence to write a book. And I think that that's why I delayed it for so long. It was the whole, I don't know what I'm going to write about. My biggest worry, and still my biggest worry to this day, even though this book is published, is like, what if people think this is stupid? I mean, I just want to validate and normalize, like, this just doesn't go away. But one of the things I did, and one of the things I recommend, and I think, this is something that my clients and I talk a lot about, is I hired support. I felt so much doubt in writing the book. And I talked to a couple people. I mean, there's companies out there that'll help you write a book. There's coaches out there. And I really, through happenstance, the universe, although I think there's no coincidences in life, met, her name is Brooke Adams-Law. And I enrolled in her program and she became my book coach. And you know what? It was kind of that person who, again, validated for me, Kelli, it's normal to feel doubt in your writing. It's normal to question yourself. And here's some tools that you can use to get started. Hey, try writing from this angle, try writing that story. It was just like that support and encouragement of somebody who was like constantly challenging you and wouldn't let you off the hook, but could also normalize how common it is and just all the emotions that you feel when you are putting such a vulnerable part of yourself out into the world. And so, if you're really struggling with doubt, I would ask yourself, what support system do I need to create around myself? And I really encourage your support system, your advisory board, whoever this is for you, is somebody who is maybe a little bit ahead of you, not somebody who's going to tell you what to do, because this is the key that makes a great coach. Great coaches don't tell you what to do. They don't say, Jen, you need to do this, or you need to write about this. They, in a very loving way, can hold space for you and challenge you and help you find your own voice. But they give you kind of just the tips and momentum you need, and sometimes even just the vision and the support to continue to move forward. So whether you're thinking of changing careers or want to build your public speaking skills, maybe you want to write a book, maybe you want to leave corporate and go into entrepreneurship, just ask yourself, what does support look like for me, so that I can do this successfully while also managing my incredible amount of doubt.
I love that. Thank you so much. That's so helpful and just really honest. So I appreciate that you're being so honest about the space that you're in with your book. It's launching and it's beautiful, by the way.
Thank you.
And I'm sure, it's amazing that you are putting that content out in the world to help and support people. So you coach as well. Is that correct?
Yep. I do one-on-one coaching and then speaking and training in organizations and publicly as well.
Yeah. What do you love best about what you do?
Oh, I love working with clients one-on-one. Honestly, I truly do. I'm an introvert, I think, which does surprise people because I do a lot of speaking. I just really love connecting with people one-on-one, getting to know them really well, understanding what their gifts and talents are. And then I'm just not afraid to challenge people. Some of my clients said that I'm no bullshit with a ton of compassion, but I love that because, people come to me because they see what's possible. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to hold you to it with a ton of love and compassion, but I'm also not going to let you off the hook. And so I think that's so rewarding because then when I get emails of clients who are like, oh my gosh, I just negotiated a $20,000 raise, or, oh my gosh, I never thought I could make a career change. And now I'm in this thing and I love it. Or they win awards, or they just they're just in a better place. And so they glow, and I love that. It's followed very closely by training. I love speaking. A lot of companies bring me in to speak to their women at work about a lot of the topics that are in my book. And so I do love that as well, but those are usually really quick. And so it's kind of like, hey, what's your favorite chocolate candy? It's kind of hard to pick one, but yeah, I do love those two things.
I'm curious from the other side of things, and you maybe kind of mentioned this earlier, but this podcast is called Untethered, and those of us who listen to it, we've got some tethers of which doubt might be one, various breeds, various flavors of doubt. But I mean, what I'm so curious about is people who have accomplished a level of success that you have. You've been a senior leader. You just published a book. You're out there coaching people. You spoke to somebody who I think is amazing, the PepsiCo Ingrid. She is just so spectacular. I listen to every podcast that she's on. I look her name up and listen to her because she's just amazing. So I look at you, I'm like, but yet you have tethers too. We all have things that just we are constantly hacking at them so that we can move forward. So What are yours? What are the things?
Yeah, I should have called the first chapter of my book Tethers. Because I talked about I love the way that you call that. So my tethers were rules. And when I say rules, I'm using quotation marks around it. It was all the rules that I thought I needed to follow to be happy and successful. So these are rules and cultural messages. I was just a sucker for cultural messages. Make sure, and let me anchor my tethers. My tethers were anchored in a small town, Nebraska Catholic upbringing where everybody was Catholic, everybody was white. Like this is just the way things happened around here. Okay. So my tethers were like, get married young so that you can have kids young. So you have a lot of energy and go to college. And my parents were educators. So they wanted you to get a master's degree. You need to weigh a certain amount so that you feel healthy and, get a job at a stable company because entrepreneurship is risky. And, all these things that I needed to do to be happy and successful. And I will tell you that those tethers of my cultural and familiar messages, and everybody's like family and culture tethers are different. I think it'd be a really interesting exercise if you're listening right now to really think about what are the cultural tethers that I've always been told that I have to follow, or the family of origin messages that I have to follow, or maybe even my company. Has my company told me something culturally, or have I come to believe that there's a way of being because that's the way leaders do things around here that I'm tethered to? And I tell you what, being tethered to all of those things and following those messages made me miserable. Like I was divorced by the time I was 30. I got into another relationship. We were engaged and I had called off that wedding about 3 months before. I had worked at the bank for a long time, great company, but I was miserable because I stayed there because I thought I had to, because it was like a jewel of the community. And like, you don't leave working here. And it wasn't until I started snipping all of those tethers, all of those messages, all those rules one by one. And I really started to ask myself, like, I quote Hamilton in my book, and there's a line from Alexander Hamilton to Aaron Burr. And he says, if you don't know what you stand for, what will you fall for? And what I realized was, it's like I was falling for everything. It's like falling to all of these cultural and family tethers that I thought I had to do to be happy. And it wasn't until I got really clear on what I stood for, what my values were, really relearning to trust my gut and my intuition again, did I have the courage, albeit very scared, doubtful, worrisome courage that like, actually, when I start to trust myself and live in alignment with my values and make hard choices, even if they go against what culture says you should do, I was a hell of a lot happier. I mean, don't get me wrong. I still struggle with these things. As an entrepreneur, there's a lot of things out there in the world that says you should do this to be a successful entrepreneur. And I have to be really careful not to tether to those, because sometimes when I've done it, I'll still find myself doing it. And I'm like, well, that didn't work because I didn't trust myself. I thought that somebody else knew better.
We live our lives thinking that somebody else knows better. And that's kind of the society that we're brought up in, even just with the way the education system works and with you having 2 educators for parents, and you don't get any more follow the rules than Catholicism. I also grew up Catholic.
Yep. Catholic school, parents are Catholic school teachers. Yeah, I was in it, man.
Yes. There's definitely so much rule following. So I feel that. And can I also just say, you just gave me the most beautiful gift, because what I want to do myself is write a book called Untethered, talking about tethers. And you were just like, you are a magnificent storyteller. I can see that in you and the way that you even just talked about it. Personal, huge gift. Thank you so much. And now I'm saying it out loud so my audience can hold me accountable to finally write this dang book.
I love it. I can literally see it already. And like every book is going to come with a pair of scissors that we can all be like, clip, 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 clip.
I love it. I've thought about I just got really excited and hit my microphone. I've had this idea, this like vision in my mind of having like an untethering where we get together as a group and we just literally cut things with giant scissors. I used to be a hairstylist too. So I'm like, how can I like bring scissors back into my life?
Oh, I love it. It's so good. And that's such a powerful ritual, because there's so much research that shows like rituals like that, cutting things, burning things, throwing things away, and doing it in community is like super powerful. That's so good.
Cool. You've just validated my weird vision.
I love it. Oh, it's not weird at all. Like that's the key, is like what cultural messages have told me that this is weird, right? Like that's a tether, because there's like something in there that says like somebody somewhere told me that this was weird, but who told me that? And like, is that message even working for me? Or is that something I need to, snip away?
It's probably my most used word is weird. And I was telling somebody just last night, like, everything is weird to me. It's like, that's my default is weird. And I love what you just said, that's a tether. Like every time that comes up, there's like a flag that you're having some kind of cultural moment where there's an opportunity to reflect. And you gave that wonderful question that listeners can ask themselves. And I'm asking myself, what are the cultural tethers? Like even in this moment, like what am I tethered to? Yeah. How many times can we say tether in this episode?
So good. It's so good though. We're all excited now. Me and everybody listening. You're like, when's the book coming out?
Yes. Okay. You told me this story that really got me interested in having you come talk on the podcast about your daughter. Will you tell us about, is it the butt ands?
The butt firsts.
Butt first.
Yeah. I gave you a little teaser on those. Okay. So when my daughter was around age 4, I say that she developed this condition called the butt firsts. And if you've ever been around children, you kind of know how this works. So basically the way this would work is anytime I would ask her to do anything that brought her discomfort, like cleaning her room, she'd be like, oh, mom, but first I need a slice of cheese. Mom, but first I need to brush my doll's hair. But first I need some water. I mean, just ludicrous excuses. And if you've been around kids, like you've heard them all, it's like, I got to go like break potato chips, whatever. Okay. Clean your room. And, it would escalate near bedtime when I would say, hey, like, we got to go to bed. She's like, oh, mom, but first I got to clean my room. It was suddenly a priority. And, as I was really thinking back on that whole gray conference room moment when I didn't speak up and just over in the course of my life, I'm like, we never really grow out of the butt firsts. We never do. They just grow more sophisticated. Because, now that we're older, they sound like, oh, I want that, but first I got to go back to college. Oh, I want to write this book, but first I need to know exactly what I'm going to write about, and it has to be perfect in my head. Oh, I want to ask for this raise, but first I need more confidence. Like, but first. And so, the way that I kind of describe it in the book is we never really grow out of the but firsts. But what they do is they really lead us to a lot of expensive thoughts. And what I call expensive thoughts are the thoughts that are like, oh, I'm not qualified yet. I'm not ready yet. It's not perfect enough yet. And these thoughts, these but first, they cost us in our peace, in our potential, and in our paycheck. And that's obviously the subtitle of the book. But, I just remember watching her grow up thinking to myself, I'm like, gosh, we just never grow out of this tendency. They just morph and they change and they get more sophisticated. And it's just a lot of those thoughts, those expensive thoughts, those but first that really keep us from taking action and moving forward. And I think that's where we can go back and use some of those tips I gave earlier about, that's when we really need to examine, are these thoughts true? No, they're not. Can I move forward and do things while also feeling really uncomfortable? Yes. And what support system do I need to help carry me through? Somebody that will like look at you and be like, Jen, you got a lot of butt firsts around writing this book, but here's your first assignment. Turn it in 2 weeks. And man, I tell you what, that sort of accountability kind of gets you going. Yeah.
Yeah, I just heard this story just yesterday about a kid. I think he lived in Idaho on a farm, 14-year-old kid, and he had started a business, a nonprofit. He had a TikTok that had millions of followers, like all of these things. He's 14 years old. Like people online were saying that he was fake, all these things, because it's like, it was unbelievable that somebody at 14 years old, he also was raised by 2 disabled parents, like just this amazing, all of the things he had accomplished. He wrote a book by 14 years old, and he unfortunately passed away in a kayaking accident. And it's just like, it's amazing though, that the story, that everything that he was able to accomplish in that small period of time, like he had to have had no but firsts.
At least not in that arena. But yeah. My goodness. Yeah. I mean, I think that's just such a good analogy that just shows like, that's how you know something isn't true sometimes, is because when you can look around the world and find evidence that like other people are succeeding in spite of these facts. Like for like the same person that says, oh, but first I need to be a little bit older before I do this, we can always find somebody younger. Oh, but first I need to go get another degree. We can always look for evidence of somebody doing what we want to do without a degree. Oh, but first I need to have more experience here, at this organization. Well, we can always find somebody who's doing the thing at an organization on day 3. Like there will always be that evidence. And I always think that that's a really good practice when we do have these. It's like, well, let's just go look for evidence of people out there who were like really successful, who don't have these things. I'm actually listening to Kendra Scott's book right now, Born to Shine. And she never graduated from college. And she's like this $1 billion entrepreneur. And I love looking for evidence in the wild like that, of all these people who do things against all the cultural tethers or odds, right, that we're supposed to be following. I'm like, no, like she's evidence that we can succeed in spite of those facts sometimes.
Yeah. And we look for a lot of evidence to support our resistance. We look for so much evidence for our own limitations, but rarely do we look, and without support, do we look for evidence of the possibility.
On the contrary. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, of the contrary, which is what you're suggesting doing. And that's what helps you like look at the balance in your life. How much are you looking for evidence for one side versus looking for the other side? And it's like a teeter-totter. Of course, you're going to be leaned over this way if you're not finding the evidence for the other, but it exists. It exists.
Yeah.
And look at Kendra Scott. It's an amazing
Absolutely.
story.
That's a coaching tool I give a lot of my clients is when they are just so like fixated on something like I am not qualified for that. And so then I'll say, well, actually, what if the opposite was more true? I'm like, what's the opposite of I'm not qualified for that? And then I make them say it. Well, I am qualified for that. Okay. Can you give me some evidence that that's true? And so that's such a good mentally flexible technique that you can try on anything is if you have something like a but first that's hardwired or one of those expensive thoughts that will not go away is just to ask yourself, well, what's the opposite of that? And actually, how could that opposite be just as true?
Love the idea of an expensive thought. That's very like tangible because they can be, right?
They can be. They can cost us, like I said, in our peace, in our potential, and in our paychecks.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. I have one last question. Well, first, is there anything that we haven't shared that you're like, oh, I have like a bomb nugget that I didn't drop on this episode?
I don't know. I felt like those tethers were some bomb nuggets, man. Let's just rest on that like it resists the urge to add more value. I think that was a good one.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay. So I have one last question I ask every single guest because I'm obsessed with magic and glitter and sparkle and your unique sparkly light, which is so shining bright in this book and in just your being and your business. But where do you see the magic in the world, Kelli?
Oh, that's such a good question. I see the magic in the world of people really learning to trust themselves and their still small voice. And maybe that goes back to like cutting some of those tethers, right? But like, that's where the magic is. Like, and if you read a biography of a lot of successful people, so I'm thinking of like Jamie Kern Lima, who started IT Cosmetics, Kendra Scott, Born to Shine, Barack Obama. There's another entrepreneur, the cupcake lady. I can't think of her name, but Sweet Success, Candace Nelson. They all tell you, and all of these people have created like some sort of unique brand of magic. And what they will tell you is they created this magic because they learned to trust their intuition, their still small voice, the thing that said, hey, Jen, I think this is what you need to do. Like, even if it meant snipping some tethers, even if it meant going against some cultural messages, even if it meant being weird or doing something that they weren't expected, like all of this magic was created because they trusted themselves and like that nudging and just that stillness inside of them that said, nope, this is the way. This is the way.
Beautifully said. I need to add nothing. We're just mic dropping on that nugget. Thank you so much for coming on. Where can people find you and your book?
Yeah. So my book is on all major platforms, including Audible. So if you're an audio listener, people are loving the audiobook. You can check it out.
Do you read it?
I do read it.
Voice? Oh, yeah.
I do read it. Yes, absolutely. So you can get it anywhere books are sold and on Audible. Otherwise, you can head to my website. I'm at kelliraythompson.com and I'm Kelli with an I, R-A-E. And I've got some free stuff there that you can download and you can poke around. And then I like to hang out on Instagram and LinkedIn, and you can find me at /Kelli Ray Thompson.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing all those bomb nugs.
Nugs. I like it.
It was so great having you on.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Oh, everything that Kelli said was just so good. I hope you were eating all of that up. I sure the heck was. The idea of the importance of speaking up when we have questions, speaking up when we have an idea and sharing, but at the same time, listening to our internal voice, listening to that quiet voice, letting that quiet voice have some room in our own body. Let that inner voice, let that little nudge that you're feeling, give it some space to speak up too. So it's like, not only can you speak up more and you assert more authority and be sharing your opinions, but also allow that inner voice to be sharing even more. So it's like this, Russian stacking dolls thing that's happening. And it just leads to so much momentum and taking action before you feel confident. Like that is the biggest thing I realized when we were having this conversation. That's one of the hugest things that I have done in order to move forward. So, and those thoughts that we have, are really expensive. I also thought that that was such a key takeaway. So thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, go on Apple Podcasts and leave a review. That helps this podcast to grow so much. Another thing that you can do is share it with a friend. If there's something in this that you're like, girl, my friend needs to hear that. She needs to be up in the rooms making big decisions. Share this episode with her and go out and buy Kelli's book because it's spectacular. Now you just keep shining your magical unicorn light out there for all to see. I'll see you next time. Bye.